talked about it in letters, and we've talked about it on the phone. But how you really feel about it, I don't really know.
What's your take on Cassavetes? 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 Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on Cassavetes?
Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy, Irresponsible Opinions About Classic Film. I'm Elise.
I'm Dave. This week, it's our Hollywood Studios Year by Year feature. We're going to be talking about two films made by MGM in 1933. We'll start out with W.S. Van Dyke's Penthouse and move on to King Vidor's The Stranger's Return.
So, would you say, since this is the theme of the series, although we don't always adhere to it, would you say that these are characteristic MGM films?
I think that Penthouse is ultra characteristic of the kind of thing that MGM was going to do maybe better than anyone else through the decade.
Don't you think there is some attempt to do their own version of a Warner-type movie here? Well, I don't think they're copying Warner Brothers, but don't you think they're responding and kind of doing their own thing with it?
I don't think that they're responding to Warner Brothers. I think that this is something that you'll see if you look back, MGM was doing already, and they're going to do it more and more. Warner Brothers did those gangster films and crime pictures for the most part, not always, but very often they are focusing entirely on the criminal.
Let's just plunge into the movie then. That is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of doing their own version of this kind of story, because the hero is actually a well-to-do lawyer.
They've been making this right along through the 30s, right? MGM's specialty in the crime film was this high-low, a meeting of the classes.
Yeah, as I was watching it, because I'm writing this incredibly complex and now very long novel that I don't know if I'm ever going to finish in my life. Depends how long my life lasts. Watching this movie, I just felt such envy of a type of dramatic writing style where you could just only deal with two classes and both of them drawn in the broadest possible strokes.
Sure. And we're not getting proletarians here. We're getting the criminal element.
Gore Vidal did refer to the criminal class as such in a joking way. So I guess I can use that too in a joking way. He said he had no interest whatsoever in the working class, but quite a bit of interest in the criminal class because the working class to him was just the lumpen proletariat.
Right. Well, I don't hold with Gore Vidal on
you
that.
love the working class. You always talk about what hardy souls they are.
Warner Brothers actually shows us a lot of working stiffs. Sometimes they're working stiffs who are pushed into committing crime. This movie has no interest, for the most part, in that, although I guess you could say people like Myrna Loy and Mae Clark may come out of that class.
Well, whether this is a conscious attempt to do a version of Warner Brothers or not, the fact is that it is instructive to compare the styles of gangster films.
Oh, yeah.
Even in this film, even the gangsters are trying to live like high society.
Exactly.
They're not like, whereas the Warner Brothers gangster seems like, is even behaving like a working class type.
Much more resentful of the upper classes.
No, here our main gangster figure worships and adores in an almost homoerotic way Warner Baxter.
Very much so, yeah.
Or maybe not almost. I think you could just call it a homoerotic way.
I would say so, yeah.
Angel, he calls him.
He does. This movie, too, why I think it is so prototypical of what we're going to get from MGM going forward is we got 2/3 of a very crucial triumvirate already in place here. We've got Myrna Loy and W.S. Van Dyke. They're going to be back next year with the twin successes of Manhattan Melodrama and The Thin Man. And actually, we've got the screenwriters of The Thin Man here, too.
And the producer.
Goodrich and yeah, for sure, Stromberg, right?
Yeah.
They're getting something together here. And Myrna Loy, this is the most important movie of her career, possibly. Although I guess you could choose any of those three that I just named as like the real turning point. Most people would go to The Thin Man as the ultimate turning point, like where she is solidified. But here we see right away that she is going to be tagged to do things that are very different from what she'd been doing in the late 20s and early 30s, which are mostly really cancelable offenses, right? She's usually wearing non-white makeup. He is not unhandsome, is he, my father?
Oh, right, I've seen that.
Yeah.
That was Fu Manchu?
Yeah,
Which one is
The
it?
Mask of Fu Manchu.
Yeah, the Mask of Fu Manchu. That was fascinating just for, again, it's a very kind of sick and sadistic serial. It wasn't really very fun, but it was
it's not fun.
sociologically very interesting.
She played these characters, these quote-unquote half-breed characters, quite often at that time, and I'm sure this was not exactly what she would have done if she had her pick.
Any woman throughout the whole studio era who had dark hair played, and even some who didn't, like Katharine Hepburn, if you had bone structure, you managed to play a non-white person at least once in your career.
When she wasn't doing that, playing a villainous non-white character, she would be doing kind of tertiary part like we saw in Love Me Tonight, which is fun. You know, could I go for a doctor? That kind of thing. Boy, could I.
Yeah, she gives some very original line readings.
She's very
zesty.
Funny in those, but she obviously wasn't being thought of as a frontline star when you're seeing her.
Well, she's really odd looking.
She's wonderful looking. But yeah,
and
I
also
guess,
odd voiced. But of course that becomes a feature.
Again, yeah, all of
her
these
stardom.
things become part of her unique charm.
Yeah.
Really, I think you do have to hand it to W.S. Van Dyke, at least on the director's side, for bringing this to the attention of the American public.
Well, according to the Wikipedia article, he told Mayer that Loy would be a big star if she continued to receive the right kinds of roles.
Yeah, exactly. An urbanite.
I did find it a little odd, given MGM's glamour reputation, that this movie felt a little perfunctory in the production. I mean, the sets are, as usual, very, very glamorous settings, and the attention has definitely been paid to the women's costumes. But it says here, music by William Axe, and I didn't hear a note of music.
There wasn't much, no.
The whole time, so no score, and some of the scenes featured weirdly, they're very peppy and energetic and well performed in general, but featured here and there a really flat line delivery that made it seem like they took the first take.
That was his nickname, right? One Take Woody.
Well, you can see it. And I mean, it gets some really fresh things, and it also gets some really clunky things.
This is not a prestige picture. This was tossed off, right?
Yeah, but compared to the early tossed off crime dramas we saw from MGM, this is like in a whole other league.
Yeah, well, he was a really effective, quick-working director. He did do some really big ones at MGM, but mostly he was given the sort of middling fare, and this one I don't even think rises to that, right? Because Warner Baxter is on loan. Myrna Loy's not a star at all.
Who's our gangster?
C. Henry Gordon, he is a creep. Oh, do you mean the good gangster?
The good gangster.
Nat Pendleton, he is in The Thin Man as well, playing the policeman in that one. I love that guy.
Yeah, he's wonderful. And, my god, looking like he came from another genre altogether, Charles Butterworth is the butler.
One of my favorite lovable sidekicks. 10 years younger than us and looking 20 years older than us.
Are you kidding me? I think you mention this every time we see him in a movie. What are some of his famous roles? Oh, well, he was in Love Me Of course, that's where we discussed him.
I fell
Love
flat
Me
on my
Tonight.
flute.
Oh, he was so good in that. And he's very good in this. I kept thinking how problematic this movie would be if he had been a black servant. Treated pretty awfully by Warner Baxter.
But they have a kind of camaraderie.
Well, yeah, that doesn't matter.
No, we don't have to worry about that because he's Charles Butterworth.
And you can treat him however you want.
We've also got Mae Clarke, who is on the downside already, unfortunately. We have seen she is one of the greatest actresses on the screen in the early 30s, but Hollywood was not treating her that way. She does get a good role in this one, but a brief one.
We will refer new listeners to our Waterloo Bridge episode.
Yeah, that's all you need. The movie and to a lesser extent, our episode.
Was she on her way down because she chose to cut her hair that way and gave herself a lesbian cut?
She was having very severe
She still looks great, though.
mental turbulence.
Did she was that a Britney when she cut her hair like that?
I don't know about that, but I know that she was on her way down because she had been hospitalized at a certain point. She went through a kind of mini Frances Farmer arc at this time.
Oh, maybe they cut her hair.
I don't know all the details, but she was not treated well.
I'm not feeling sensitive today, can you tell?
I guess not. We already saw as early as The Public Enemy, which is 1931, she's already getting pretty minor treatment. She gets smashed in the face with the grapefruit.
And you think that's probably what happened to her, is that she was having these mental troubles and...
Well, I've read about that.
It stalled her career and...
Yeah, it definitely stalled her career. She was determined to be unreliable, and obviously no one was thinking about her welfare. They just shoved her around, put her through Foucauldian institutions.
Put a grapefruit in her face.
She's great in this movie, and she leaves an impression, which you need. Phillips Holmes, I like everyone in this cast. Now, of course, Nat Pendleton doesn't seem very much like an Italian gangster to me, but that's what he's supposed to be. It's fine. It just feels kind of like a fortunate accident that this movie turned out as well as it did. Or it's just W.S. Van Dyke working his magic.
And I guess, as with the Thin Man movies, I'm not very familiar with them, but it really has a casual and breezy feel. And the caper itself manages to be at once simple-minded to the point of psychological implausibility and hard to follow.
We'll give a brief plot synopsis here. Warner Baxter is an upper crust lawyer who has stumbled upon the fact that he gets a real kick out of defending the criminal element.
He gets to mix with real, lively, authentic people.
Yes. As we first meet him, he is coming out of the courthouse after scoring a major victory, getting Nat Pendleton off from a death sentence.
Then he goes back home to the law firm that his father founded, where all they do is write wills for wealthy widows who leave their fortunes to their lapdogs.
Exactly.
So he's a real Jimmy McGill type.
Yeah, one of them is Samuel S. Hines. Did you notice?
Who is he?
Peter Bailey.
I didn't notice, no.
Yeah. Anyway, they tell him, we don't want to be associated with you anymore. I think you better take yourself to another firm, start your own law firm, and we will continue with our safe practice that keeps us in good with high society.
Hang up your own shingle.
He also is engaged to a woman from that class who we find out as soon as he actually runs into her. You know, she's basically done with him as well. The headlines are too much for her. She wants no part of this. She's already decided to take up with Phillips Holmes, who is, must be said, much closer in age to her. Seems like a better match all around, and he's a nice guy.
Warner Baxter, all I know him from other than this is where he's playing a weirdly queenie and yet inappropriately Me Too-ish
42nd Street.
Yeah, what is he?
He's the director.
Just the director.
I love Warner Baxter. He's actually a great performer, I find, but he is kind of an odd leading man in Hollywood. He seems like he should be past his prime at this point, but he kept going and he does some great stuff.
I've seen 42nd Street a million times, and yet his trajectory in that always surprises me. Doesn't he end up really seeming like he might be gay and also have a very sad ending in that movie?
Well, he nearly dies, right? Because he's not in good health and he pushes himself to the limit to make a success of the show. And then it is a success, and then he's sort of moping at the end. Everyone else is thrilled with what has happened, and he just is like, well, another triumph, and now I have nothing else. And he has an ending that's kind of like Mr. Matichak. I mean, he goes off with a young man from the show.
But maybe not the same way that Mr. Matichak did.
Well, we have no idea. It's not any clearer in one movie than in the other.
I've never thought of Mr. Matichak that way before.
No, I'm just kidding. He's lonely, that's all. But yes, it's true. In 42nd Street, you might be thinking...
I've always read him that way. Anyway, that's 42nd Street.
But he's also in Broadway Bill, a great minor Capra film. He's in Prisoner of Shark Island, one of the really good John Ford movies, actually. He's a pretty cool actor, and he kept going into the 40s. He's not like a Clark Gable or a William Powell.
Sure. Which
are the leading men Myrna Loy is going to get next in Manhattan Melodrama.
He's very likable in this.
Yeah, he's great. We're with him through all of this. He is disgusted that he got himself hung up up on this woman who is so shallow that she can be thrown by
Well, there's a really
insinuations in the newspapers.
really interesting double standard here.
Yeah.
Where she doesn't want him to be in the papers defending criminals and mixing with that sort, but she doesn't mind that her appropriate fiancé had a mistress from that milieu, as long as he is quiet about it and gets rid of her before they get married. And
Right.
she's like totally, she knows it completely and seems to have no problem with it whatsoever.
Yeah, well, she knows that he was just turning to Meg Clark for solace because he's been in love since they were kids with, I don't know the actress's name.
No.
Susan is the character's name. Martha
Sue?
Sleeper.
Well, don't know anything about Martha Sleeper. She studied dancing for 5 years with Russian ballet master Louis H. Shalif, or however the heck you would pronounce that with a Russian accent.
She's not an actress I know. I think she's good in this.
She's
She does exactly what is required of her.
It's not much of a role.
I think the difference, and if you want to give her the benefit of the doubt, which I always want to give everyone if I can, I mean, look, he is being trailed by bodyguards. He is really in thick now with guys that kill people every day.
Well, she also later regrets her decision.
I don't know, if you told me that, hey Dave, my new job is going to be associating with people that shoot people every day.
Yeah, but that's not her motivation. Her motivation is that it looks bad. You know that.
Anyway, she has turned to Phillips Holmes, and yes, as you say, but that's the difference, right? That Phillips Holmes, he's not involved permanently with this element.
And also not publicly.
But she sticks by him when it does become public that he is accused of murdering his paramour.
Well, she sort of sticks by him. Except
Yeah.
she decides she likes Werner Baxter more again.
She's all over the place.
Fickle kid.
Look, she's been throwing a bunch of curveballs. She doesn't know what to do. But yes,
You would think from this movie that the upper crust and gangsters were just running across each other's paths and screwing up each other's lives all the time.
Well, I think they probably were in Manhattan.
Manhattan melodrama.
Exactly. B.S. Van Dyke is a genius at managing this kind of situation. The actual murder that becomes the center of the plot, quite a grim affair. May Clark, she actually really loves Phillips Holmes, and he was really just toying with her, waiting to get back into the good graces of someone on his own level.
Well, that's a generous reading of her character. She seems like she just had a tantrum because she got jilted. But she handles her rejection a lot better than her ex-boyfriend does, her gangster ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, this guy is a monster. C. Henry Gordon. He's got the meanest eyes in the world. When he gets a phone call from her, he pretends that he wants to pick up where they left off, and he's very understanding, but
he's setting everything up to kill her and frame the rich boyfriend.
Deep vengeance here. And he comes up with this plot in like 5 minutes on the phone, clearly.
He's been fantasizing about this phone call for a long time.
Yeah, and here it is, and he does not miss his chance. So he says, yeah, come on over.
Yeah, that's really a startling act of violence very
is.
early in the film.
May Clark is on her way over. He pulls strings to invite Phillips Holmes over. They've had an ugly scene, and May Clark has threatened to expose him in the newspapers, which maybe would get him in Dutch with Sue Leonard. When May Clark gets there, again, Jim Prellman is the gangster. He orders her regular drink, acts like everything is hunky-dory. Phillips Holmes gets there. He suggests they go out on the terrace.
There's a lot of talking people into going onto the terrace in this movie.
There is. Yeah, don't do it.
Don't ever go onto the terrace in Manhattan.
But yeah, this guy builds his alibi. He tells everyone who will listen that he's totally fine with what happened with May Clark. No hard feelings whatsoever. Before you know it, there's a gunshot. Everyone runs out. She's dead. Dopey Phillips Holmes has the gun in his hand. He's done for. Police come and get him. Take him away.
Do we ever find out how he got the gun in his hand?
He says, I saw May Clark was lying
Oh,
dead.
and like an idiot, like Cary Grant in North by Northwest, he just picked it up.
Yeah, well, he said something hit him in the foot because it was thrown. The gun was thrown onto the balcony, and he picked it up.
Never do that either. Someone throws you something when someone just got shot in front of you, don't pick it up. Or if
Yeah.
someone gets stabbed, don't pick it up. Just don't pick it up.
Look at it, and if it's a weapon, don't pick it up. Yeah. The only person who has the acumen to break down this story is going to be Werner Baxter.
Well, he doesn't have a whole hell of a lot of acumen, though. Because wouldn't the first person that you would suspect be the ex-gangster boyfriend whose place this all happened at.
There's no way to prove it. He has to prove it.
Yeah, but he doesn't even seem to suspect it.
He does, because so Sue shows up and asks him, please take the case. I know that I did a terrible thing to you, but please do this for Phillips Holmes, Tom Siddle. He says, of course I will. And as soon as she leaves, he gets a phone call saying, you better lay off the case. And then he's like, okay, I know that they did it, and I know that Phillips Holmes isn't guilty, but that doesn't help him. He needs to find out how, and he knows that Krellman has an airtight alibi. He didn't do it.
Alright, I guess so.
He needs to prove some link between Krellman and someone else who could have done it.
Alright, well, you have a more generous interpretation of how well this plot works than I do.
It's all about establishing links between Krellman
Well,
and the
I
trigger
wanted
person.
him to say, right from the top, or at least from the time of the phone call, oh, it's Krellman, now we have to put it all together. That's what I wanted from this. That got left on the cutting room floor.
Warner Baxter's primary ally in the underworld, Nat Pendleton, who has said that he will do anything for him because of the courtroom heroics at the beginning of the film.
Yeah,
He's an enemy of Krellman.
This is a cross-class Becker kind of relationship happening here. This gangster talks about sleeping with women, but they also sleep with women in the Becker movie.
They do, yeah.
What was it called again?
Touche pas Grisby?
Yes, that's it.
So yeah, he's got this ace in the hole.
They just don't love women.
That's
they
right.
sleep with them, but they love men.
Of course, Warner Baxter is in good with the police as well. The police chief does him a few favors. It's Robert Emmett O'Connor, the actor, that we see mainly as the representative of the cops. They let him go in to talk to Phillips Holmes.
So what did you think about this psychology here, where the police are treating this young playboy so badly? They just assume that he did it. Do you think the police would actually be so ready to condemn one of his class?
Yeah, if everyone saw him do it, which is basically the case. Everyone rushed out onto the balcony, he was alone there, and there was no way off of it, and he had a gun in his hand, you would convict him, unless someone does something really masterful in proving that it wasn't him, and that's the crux of this film. Right from the start, Warner Baxter is asking Nat Pendleton to get everything he can on Krellman. So he knows it's Krellman. He just needs some kind of actual evidence he can present in court. What Nat Pendleton is able to do is not give him anything specific, but he gives him Myrna Loy, who was the best friend of Mae Clark, and who was not actually at the party until after the murder occurred, but does know all of these people and may have something that she can offer. Through the dialogue, it comes out. He doesn't actually ask her over to his house so that he can have sex with her. He wants to just talk to her until she says something that will help him to start working this case out. And she mentions fairly quickly in the conversation that the pawnbroker that gave the clinching bit of evidence about Phillips Holmes and the gun is actually an associate of the evil Krellman.
She also talks about her passionate love for Mae Clark.
Yes,
which
she
is
does.
very nice. Very Laura Palmer-ish.
I really like...
And it was some kind of little piece of jewelry Mae Clark had given her that gets broken, that gets talked about.
Yeah, watch.
That sets off the pawnbroker talk.
Yep.
If you are invested in thinking that this is an airtight murder mystery plot, by all means, be my guest.
But it becomes obviously a lot more than that, because we see right away that there is quite a spark between Myrna Loy and Warner Baxter.
Yeah, it's very odd, this structure, where he just invites her over to basically stay until she spills the beans, and her being Gangster's Mall, she's
a party girl.
A good time girl, a party girl. She assumes that there's going to be sex involved. And when there isn't, and they turn out to just really like each other, why they start to like each other even more. She's wearing that absolutely ridiculous dress for most of the movie, too. It's so odd looking.
It seemed nice to me.
It looks like she's wearing big bows on her breast, but she's not.
Who did the clothes for this? Was it
I don't think it was
Adrian?
anybody exciting. Ori Kelly is at Warner, so it
Yeah.
must be Adrian at MGM, right?
Well, at least Adrian was in charge of the department, but we don't know if he did the dresses specifically for this movie.
It was not a fine moment of Adrian's.
All of that byplay becomes the center of the film here in the apartment, in the penthouse, which it's named after.
Which is important because that's how everyone's getting killed, living in penthouses or
skyscraper
living and
murders.
entertaining.
Yeah, different levels of buildings become very important. Again, a lot of it, we don't have to go into the details of the detection. That's fun. I think it works, but
The fact that Charles Butterworth is in this, does this make you feel like W.S. Van Dyke saw Love Me Tonight and was like, I must have these two actors in something? something?
Maybe, I don't know. Hey, Charles Butterworth, he was around. I don't know if he was under exclusive contract to MGM at this time.
You never know, they're always moving around.
He was also in Forsaking All Others. He plays Clark Gable's sidekick in that one, and he plays Robert Taylor's sidekick in Magnificent Obsession, which is Universal. So he just goes wherever he's needed. I think he probably had a freelance kind of situation.
So he seems to always play a similar type of character where he's asexual but talks about being a big wolf.
Yeah, he's got many kids at home. He also says that he liked Sue, the former fiancée, but she didn't arouse his animal instinct.
The beast in him.
That's right. A very odd dynamic at the Penthouse, but I find it very enjoyable.
Myrna Loy wins over the servant with a mixture of her generous nature and her sexy attitude, sort of like Miriam Hopkins in the other movie.
We do get a bunch of drop-ins on Nat Pendleton's. We see the kind of life he's leading. He is doing puzzles. He's got his manservant dressed up in a ridiculous outfit because he thinks it's classy. And he's really aspirational.
A man of leisure, a man of intellect. He's not actually trying to read, though. That would be a step beyond.
No.
And also the upper class don't read anyway.
No, that's true. But he does. He has acquired much better vocabulary and diction than he presumably had.
He has some good lines, for sure.
He says, hey, I could talk the way you do in court. Watch out. You might have some competition. Really is a true blue friend. There is no twist in this one.
Yeah, but he's so obsessed with Warner Baxter that he threatens to kill anyone and everyone, including Myrna Loy, that ever does him a wrong.
That's right,
and his own henchmen.
A lot of other comedy scenes with the bodyguards. This is the kind of thing that you see fairly often in old movies, the kind of bumbling bodyguards. But
actually,
they're good.
In movies to this day, I'm pretty sure that's a trope.
Warner Baxter doesn't seem to have any trouble losing them when he needs to, but they keep showing up again to pick up his tail.
For a guy who's been writing wills for lapdogs for a long time, he certainly, has the drop on all of these criminal types.
He's crafty. The end, though, I really do want to talk a lot about this because it's fascinating. What they need to do, there is no way to get Phillips Holmes out of this predicament unless he can show 100% really, really convincing circumstantial evidence, or I guess get a confession that it could have been done by someone else. He starts out with the ballistics report he gets from his friend on the police force. That gets him thinking about someone shooting from another building, because the angle's all wrong. If Phillips Holmes had actually shot her from where he was standing, the bullet wouldn't have gone.
Yeah, he terrifies Charles Butterworth with a demonstration with a gun.
That's a funny scene. Myrna Loy, again, crucial bit of evidence relayed is that she lives across the street. She has a view of the very balcony where the murder was committed. The building is owned by Krellman, and one of Krellman's top goons lives right upstairs from her. And Warner Baxter has to go to that building, skulk around, really court death, find out if he can prove to himself at least, so that he can then start arguing persuasively that the gunshot came from the room above Myrna Loy's house.
Meanwhile, Myrna Loy is on her own mission.
Yeah. She finds out about what he's trying to do, and she decides to lure this little criminal out of there, the little gunman, George E. Stone.
Now, this is a part where I was paying no attention. How do they know he's the gunman?
Because he lived upstairs from Myrna Loy, and that's where the shot would have had to come from.
That's all they got to go
Well,
on.
and he is Krellman's top assassin.
All right.
So it all makes sense.
Again, they all should have put this together a lot faster. Although it only does take a day, it's true.
Yeah, it's
in movie
all
time, it takes quite a while.
Very quickly.
There's no stumbling blocks. Every time a new piece of the puzzle emerges, it comes together very easily, unlike it does for our gangster friend.
And they have to know for sure and then try to act really quickly, because look, when he figures out that the pawnbroker is involved and is actually offering false testimony at the behest of Krellman,
also, Krellman just starts...
He just knocks off the pawnbroker as well.
Krellman just starts killing or threatening to kill everybody, at which point it's like, why did you bother to have this master plan anyway? If you're going to kill everybody who just gets in your way, you're not going to hide the fact that you killed the woman in the first place very well.
He's getting away with it.
And if he can kill people with impunity, then why did he bother to have... And why is he bothering to kill them? It's like a vicious circle.
Well, he really wants Phillips Holmes to go to the chair for this. It's like part of his poetic justice. He didn't just want to kill May Clark. He wanted to get her boyfriend as well.
No, but it seems like he can just kill anybody he wants to.
Yeah, but
and maybe
he likes the idea of Tom Siddle being fried as a guilty man, right? Like, that's much different from just shooting him.
I guess.
I think that's part of his dream scenario. He has gone to great lengths. Now, Myrna Loy, there's a misunderstanding that they clear up fairly quickly, but it does cause Warner Baxter to blurt out that he was feeling jealous, that he thought she was backstabbing him and going to talk to this gunman.
It's a very nice scene. Again, though, sorry, I'm still stuck on this issue of killing everybody. Can he or can he not kill Warner Baxter? Because he's going to kill him, and then he stops, because Warner Baxter is like, you shouldn't do that. You're gonna definitely get caught shooting me.
He shouldn't pull the trigger, and he never does. That's the thing. He has other people kill people.
So it's just the henchman can kill anybody.
Yeah, exactly. I think that all makes sense. This is a really violent world, and it's a really interesting...
But if the henchmen kill Warner Baxter, then everybody's going to know that there's something up with this case.
Right, but can they prove it? That's the important thing.
I don't know. I think it would sound good in court if you said everybody who tried to defend this guy got killed.
But then you can't actually pin it on anyone in specific.
Well, you can't pin it on anyone then. Reasonable doubt. So then he doesn't fry.
Well,
I'm going to keep poking holes in this.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking of the whole time.
Look, what happens at the end is the most interesting thing about it sociologically. The movie is making either a really fascist statement or a very critical statement, the state of police ethics.
No, there's no, I don't feel a bit of criticism here.
Fine, but it works as criticism as well, right? Because Warner Baxter...
It's MGM as usual. It's like Red Dust. But it works as criticism even though there's no criticism at all.
Because it's so blatantly fascist.
Yeah, exactly.
That it tells you something about that society and probably about our current society, the way police forces work, right? The confession is wrung out of the killer so that they can get to the man that hired him to commit the killing, because everyone just accepts the fact that the cops do stuff like this. He is told that they're just going to rub out Krellman because otherwise a police bribery scandal is going to erupt. And this is very convincing to George E. Stone. He's like, okay, I guess, yeah, this is what the cops do. If a gangster gets in the way, they'll kill him themselves and pin it on someone else.
Well, I guess the only thing that saves it is that you're supposed to be like, well, only a dirty little criminal like this could think the police actually operated that way. But still, they force, under circumstances of terror, a confession out of him.
Yeah, it's really, really brutal.
It's hard to watch. Especially since our hero is the ringleader of this.
Yeah, he's the one saying all of it. He's not even a cop, but the cops are there just nodding.
And he's supposed to be so clean. See, none of this movie makes no sense. He's supposed to be so clean that he will defend a gangster as long as the gangster isn't guilty. But then that means he'll also bend the law to put away a gangster that is guilty?
Yes. He definitely will.
If you're guilty, we'll do anything. If you're not guilty, I'll defend you even though you're guilty of everything else.
That's right.
None of it makes sense. But the romance with Myrna Loy is very nice. She gives the most wonderful line readings.
She is incredible in this movie.
She has such aplomb and such eccentricity.
I don't know if there's ever been a party girl character quite like this in a film. And I mean, the movie treats her so respectfully, as Warner Baxter does. Not what you're used to from movies. Even during the pre-code era, there's usually a lot more judgmental.
And isn't this a little bit odd for MGM, that the chorus girl ends up with the lawyer at the end?
Well, I don't know if I would say...
Or not chorus girl, but party girl.
Yeah, I don't know about that, because Jean Harlow often played characters like this who get the guy as well, but she plays them very differently, and she has to suffer a lot more cracks about her virtue. Yeah, but not a guy
like this. Like, Clark Gable is rich in Red Dust, but he's not classy and not part of high society.
It really does feel like an exception, not just at MGM, but at any studio, for a pairing like this to happen, and they are so blithely heedless of the social consequences when he asks her to marry him.
Yeah. And she just acts throughout the whole thing like nothing could ever possibly throw her for a loop. I think I prefer this role to her Thin Man wife roles.
I don't think it's as good a movie as The Thin Man, but I do think that this is, one of the best roles she ever got, right up there with Test Pilot and Best
Isn't
Years
there-
of Our Lives.
Oh yeah, Test Pilot. Isn't there kind of a story behind Myrna Loy like there is with Carol Lombard? Everyone kind of just loving her personally and thinking she was very funny in person and being like, why can't we get this on the screen? Why doesn't the studio just quit their star-making bullshit and we could just get this on the screen? And then someone eventually managed to do
Well,
it.
it's W.S. Van Dyke, if it's anyone. Maybe he's the one that knew her off screen and thought it wasn't being translated to the public in vehicles like
She
Mask of Fu
certainly
Manchu.
does act like she must just walk around being like this all the time. Doesn't act like anyone else in any movie.
No, and 5 years from now, she's going to be named Queen of Hollywood, along with Clark Gable as King. Her career is kind of odd because she never really got the woman's picture spotlight that people like Joan Crawford and Bette Davis and
Right.
Stanwyck got. She's always a co-star rather than someone that dominates a movie. It's a different kind of stardom.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, I can't think of any movie that Myrna Loy is the sole focus in.
Well, maybe she's good at intersubjectivity.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how I feel about her. It makes sense that she is one of the absolute masters of dialogue and conversation on film.
And it, like I said, her tone is very, very conversational.
Yeah, you can't just have her brooding by herself over...
No, she wouldn't. She doesn't have any of that brooding woman's picture energy.
Right, so she never got any of those movies.
I guess, you could have her be, if you wanted to do a movie with her, you could actually have her be a female detective, but on her own, right? But no one decided to do that.
No, I don't think they ever quite did that, but she does get more and more actively involved in the Thin Man cases. But they always have a hint of sexism to them.
But I guess, as you say, her specialty is banter.
Right, I mean, and before this, again, she was playing kind of closed-off characters, but it was in things like 13 Women, where she is a Eurasian serial killer.
It's funny, someone who's slightly like that, who's really made to play comedy, is Claudette Colbert, and yet she did get some women's picture roles.
She did.
I mean, she got Imitation of Life anyway.
No, more than that. No, she did get quite a few. Myrna Loy and Warner Baxter will be paired again in Broadway Bill, and I love that movie, too. We'll have to do that sometime, some way. It's not made at a major studio. It's a Capra Columbia film, right, about horse racing. It's an interesting variation on this.
All right, well, next we're on to the Vidor. So maybe it's time, Dave, that we actually talk about King Vidor, because he wasn't really the main attraction when we were doing Duel in the Sun and Ruby Gentry for the Jennifer Jones series, and also we just sort of kind of plunged into those and assumed knowledge. And then the only other one we've done, I think, is the Marion Davies comedy Not So Dumb, which seems to be the least regarded and known of his 3 Marion Davies comedies.
Yeah, the other 2 are better, for sure.
I was looking over his extensive Wikipedia entry and even learned some things I hadn't known before.
Excellent.
I did not know that he was the son of a wealthy Texas family.
Yeah.
Or that he was a Christian Scientist.
Transcendentalist of sorts.
Well, that makes Ginger Rogers and her mother transcendentalists. I don't think you can connect the dots that directly between Christian Science and other more intellectual forms of American mysticism.
Well, it comes out of that
and
matrix.
like those crazy fuckers, Ginger Rogers and her mother, he did join the Anti-Communist League.
Yes, there are distinct phases of Vidor's career and life and political thought.
But
and
are they really distinct, though? Because watching this movie made me think he's already very Randian, although he's about to make the sequel to The Crowd.
Our Daily Bread.
This was a very, very Randian movie, I thought.
Well, look, it can go a lot of different ways. Transcendentalism can seem like the most individualistic life philosophy on Earth, but it also led people to join communes. And Vidor, I think you see, navigated between those poles politically throughout the early 20th century before settling on his kind of final attitude, which was a libertarian style attitude.
And there is a sort of agrarian idealism about this movie that makes you understand why he'd be making it around the same time as Our Daily Bread.
Yeah. He was never a Marxist. Like, he didn't have some kind of idea about dialectical materialism leading to a synthesis.
Or even to organized labor.
No.
Banding together to get workers' rights.
No, definitely not. It was always about people coming together freely to associate themselves in a more perfect union that would benefit everyone. And that is utopian socialism at best.
Well, it sounds very much like Capra.
A little bit more radical than Capra, because you don't really get any Capra movies about people completely retreating from society as it is and creating a new society. It's more like creating little pockets within society, whereas our Daily Bread...
Where the Boy Scouts can lead us.
Yeah, our Daily Bread really is about, let's go start something completely on our own. Now, that can't work. That's not a viable model of socialism, because you're still, as the Transcendentalists discovered, as Hawthorne writes in the Bloodale Romance, you start that, then you're just entering into competition with everyone that didn't come to your commune, and you're still part of the capitalist system. When we talk about Emersonian Marxism, or whatever our particular brand of politics is here, and philosophy, it is emerging from this idea that in order to manifest full individuality, people need to pool their resources, and economics should be serving individuality rather than the other way around.
Sure, but this movie has nothing to do with any of that.
No, it doesn't.
It does have to do with the idea of America as being a country. And again, this is not, as we were talking about the last movie, this is just blatantly presented. It is not a negative value judgment, but it can be seen as such, depending on your perspective. America being a country that is about property ownership and pride in property ownership, where people come and have this idea of long-established traditions, although they only go back
100 years.
At most.
Yeah.
With land that they overtly talk about having stolen from the Indians, who are briefly discussed here, not in flattering terms.
No.
And, and they don't even have traditions comparable to the Europeans, let alone the indigenous people.
Exactly.
And that is our hero, Lionel Barrymore.
Yes.
And his daughter, his spiritual daughter and actual granddaughter, Miriam Hopkins.
We're reading today about the impact that this particular film made on Ozu.
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out, other than the fact that it has comedy scenes interspersed with melodrama and a lot of food. Both things that Ozu likes.
Well, but the transcendental style. This Emersonian attention, or Zen attention to small details that just breathe life into every moment and into every viewer, I think. I mean, I just feel incredible watching this movie. Certainly, I didn't really ever think about this, but yeah, it does feel a bit like watching an Ozu movie.
A bit. He was also, in that quote that you found, he was also ragging on Sternberg.
Well, I don't think he was ragging on him. I guess he just thinks that Vidor is better and more unapproachable as a genius.
I think the context of that is probably, and you'd have to refer back to our Anadahan episode, but the context is that it seems that Sternberg was actually considered a big deal in post-war Japan by other filmmakers, as opposed to what had happened to his reputation in America. Maybe,
but I think that Ozu quotation is from the mid-30s.
Oh, okay.
So he was talking about, he had just seen The Stranger's Return.
Ah, I see. I thought this was from later in his career, and when he was sort of communicating with America.
It was pulled out of actual talk about the American movies that were reaching.
In that case, then he, just like everybody else, misunderstood Sternberg.
Maybe he understood Vidor very well. In any event, I do see the kinship.
Well, I'd have to see more Ozu movies from the 30s to maybe understand the kinship. He was feeling better.
Maybe, but no, I feel like this has more in common with the 50s Ozu movies that we love.
You must articulate this more, or can you not articulate it better?
I was trying. I feel like this entire movie feels like some of the scenes staring at the Zen gardens in late spring, which we just saw.
How so, though?
It is so...
It's very calm compared to the frenetic, screwballish atmosphere of the crime drama we just watched.
It's so beautifully shot. It is very still.
This isn't what all Vidor movies are like, though. Even all Vidor melodramas. He really seems to...
He has several modes.
This sort of, like I was saying, agrarian, rural mode seems to be something he was exploring at this time.
Yeah, well, it comes up again in The Wedding Night in a totally different way, because there he is very disturbed by some of the traditions that emerge from the agrarian life, and it has a very terrible effect on the life of Anna Sten's character.
Well, she doesn't, Miriam Hopkins doesn't get the greatest shakes in this movie, except through the protection of her grandfather. We get a very typical Vidor melodrama situation here, which is a independent, spirited woman coming up against small-town narrow-mindedness.
Not only small town, I mean, Vidor will throw some women into big city small-mindedness as well.
Which one are you thinking of?
I mean,
I think
Stella Dallas.
That's a small town still, isn't it?
It starts
There's
out
a
in a
mill.
small town, but by the end they're living in New York, I believe.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all on set, so I can't tell.
But
but it's true. Encountering
narrow-mindedness, point final,
in
I think.
any social group,
Yeah, it's
any general social grouping.
a woman that the film sides with and cares about more than anything else is hemmed in and constrained by most other people that she meets. And in most Vidor films, nobody really emerges to throw this person a lifeline. He explores what is possible, what a woman can do in that situation without any help at all.
Well,
Now,
usually ends up pretty destroyed.
either
Although
dead
with
or...
a sort of transcendental solace.
That's right. That's right. Now, in this film, she does, as you point out, stumble upon someone with actual social and political power who decides to invest it in her and pass it on to her, literally.
It's a Jane Austen inheritance of the estate movie.
It doesn't start out that way. You don't have any sense, I don't think, when you first begin to watch it, that is how it's going to evolve.
Oh, pretty quickly. As soon as she's snuggling up to her grandpa on the first night and sneaking smokes with him.
Right, but you discover with her the pleasures of this kind of life as the film sees it, right? Like the idea of the farm. She doesn't have any ideas one way or the other about the farm, except that her dad spoke lovingly of it, even though he had a falling out with Lionel Barrymore and never went back and has died. So there is that, I guess, in the background that, her dearly departed father loved this place, and she's been having a rough time. She can't make it in the Depression big city right now. She says so.
So what is this called again? Storkholm? Or what is
Storehaven.
Storehaven.
Because their name is Store.
Yes.
She needs to recharge her batteries, she says. She's tired of fighting for a job, losing her jobs. We don't really find out exactly what she was doing for a living in the big city, but she was also married and that didn't work out. And the movie is amazingly blithe about all of that, amazingly modern about that.
Well, it's incredible. I guess the fact that she doesn't end up with anyone romantically is what allowed him to have such flexibility with this sort of not married, sort of married character.
Well, she is divorced.
Oh, is she actually divorced?
Yeah.
I thought it was a Age of Innocence situation.
No, she's divorced.
Because they keep talking about not living with her husband.
He's not involved
But
anymore.
yes, you don't ever see that either.
No, not at all.
Unless they're going to get back together in the course of the movie.
Right, no, this guy is never coming back. We never hear his name or anything.
Yeah.
We don't hear about him mistreating her. It doesn't seem like that was the case. It was just they didn't get along, the marriage was bad, and they dissolved it. And she's trying to figure out what to do next.
Even Ruby Gentry, the swamp whore, or whatever she's considered to be, she does love her rural lifestyle.
She does. She loves it.
And
she loves hunting.
It's clear that she loves the boat, too, even though she might have also liked to have had sex with Charlton Heston, but better sex than they did have.
Well, yeah, she's found some kind of life for herself as a Gertrude on a fishing boat at the end of Ruby Gentry. This is kind of a precursor of that, but without a lot of the murdering that goes on in Ruby Gentry.
This is the alternate universe in which Ruby Gentry gets some kind of life.
We meet the household before anything else, really.
But the ending is very transcendental.
Yeah.
In that who else is she going to meet? It's her in this house and this land, and that's it.
Yeah, and she's
not going to meet anyone else who's suitable for her romantically at this point.
No, and she's made her peace with that. I think that she's going to enjoy it. Of course, it's
She'll
melancholy.
She'll have regrets.
Yeah,
but
who doesn't?
Regrets, I've had a few.
She's going to have a good life on this new property, and she's going to work, and she's got her ally, Stu Irwin's character, who's pretty great. I really like that character, the handyman, the guy that drinks the corn liquor.
Yeah, but why is he threatening to choke a woman at one point? That was weird.
Yes, that is weird. He was drunk. I don't know what was going on there. They may have been talking about some kind of consensual asphyxiation play. That's what it sounded like, frankly.
It's absolutely bizarre. Like, how did that get in the movie?
I don't know. It's weird. This is a weird movie.
Because he too seems like he could turn into that freaky brother in Ruby Gentry. He seems slightly ambivalent.
Yeah.
As a character, and he doesn't get anything. He is, well, okay, let's skip ahead to, and then we'll work out the details. The ending, this slave is not enfranchised in the will.
No.
And you get the feeling he doesn't want to be.
No, he says it all the way through. The movie makes it clear he can't handle getting any more money than he gets because he will just spend it on more liquor and die.
And Grandpa has a little speech with Miriam Hopkins about the little people, how you have to spank the little people, but then pay for them to live. And this is part of the Randian ethos.
It's also Emersonian.
The rich, powerful people have to take care of the little people and spank them now again? That's Emersonian?
His language easily translates into propertied and not propertied. He's talking about something else, but one of the reasons Emerson was as great as he was is because he had property and didn't have to work for a living. He could quit being a minister as soon as things got less enchanting for him in that life, and he just wrote and lived off of his wife's fortune.
Well, what I'm envisioning here is two types of people in the world. Some make money because they have great and wonderful character, and then they take care of the other stupid slobs who are usually, though not always if you're Beulah Bondi, well-meaning.
Right. Most people are well-meaning. Beulah Bondi is not.
No.
She's not well-meaning in Street Scene either. So Vidor used her as a pretty nasty character all around.
She could do both. And looked exactly the same for 30 years. Is she 15 in this movie? How old is she in this movie?
She's probably in her 40s, I would think.
Yeah, and she didn't change.
Capable of a wide range.
Without really changing any way that she behaves. She could play good and she could play bad.
And a lot of
things
in
between. And she gets to do
between.
both in It's a Wonderful Life.
Well, yeah, in Pottersville, she's a real crusty character. So Lionel Barrymore, I agree with you. He is some kind of Ayn Rand type character, but he's also, as I say, an Emersonian character. He is self-reliant in the extreme. He trusts his own instincts about everything, including what he should eat, which I think, he's way off base there. But
it's interesting. Okay, maybe I don't understand. In fact, I'm sure I don't understand Christian Scientists, because Vidor is always very disrespectful of religion. Is that, is organized religion a target of Christian Science?
What was his commitment to Christian Science?
His mother was a Christian Scientist,
yeah, okay.
And he was raised with it.
So
and
he wasn't
according
really...
to this Wikipedia article, his work is all about the moral themes of Christian Science, which, incidentally...
are transcendentalists.
Which are described as... what did the article... Pragmatic self-help and Christian mysticism.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of debased transcendentalism.
Well, yeah, not an accident. I mean, it comes out of that matrix, and it is an institutionalized version of transcendentalism, just as Unitarianism became, and both of those are...
That was the one for intellectuals.
Yeah, but neither of them are really the ones... I don't think Vidor actually did anything organized with them at a certain point. He just held on to those attitudes towards existence, and those serve an artist very well in general.
Did you ever read Vidor's autobiography?
Yes, A Tree is a Tree.
And you don't remember him talking about Christian Science?
Not as something that he
A tree is a tree. Now, that's a very Ozu type, or at least very Buddhist type statement.
Yeah, it's not... I don't remember him talking about it as something that was really overwhelmingly active in his life when he wrote the book in the 50s. But I haven't read it in a long time.
So we were talking about Grandpa's list of qualities, and one of them is that he likes going to church, but sleeps during the sermon about, wicked fallen man.
Yeah, he's not interested in that. He just finds that environment peaceful.
Not into the Calvinism.
No, not at all.
He's into the aesthetics.
Yeah, I love that scene where the dog comes in. That just...
Yeah, what the hell?
It's just there for you to enjoy.
Well, that's one of those details you're talking about.
So much wonder. I love this movie so much.
But it's describing those sorts of qualities is very hard to do, because if you're not writing notes as you watch the movie.
You just have to see this movie, and it's really hard to see and find. So I'm telling you out there, please write to us if you want to see it. We will make sure that you are able to see it, because everyone should.
It was interesting. On a first viewing, it wasn't necessarily one of my favorite Vidors that I've seen, but I liked it.
I find this one has more in common with H.M. Pullum Esquire than any of his other films.
I don't think I've seen that one.
That movie rules as well. It just happened to be the one that I chose as my image for my impactful films, which I just put up every day on Twitter. It's with Robert Young and Hedy Lamarr and Van Heflin.
You said rules. That was like a complete 80s throwback. That's how old we are.
Yeah, I really like this movie. That doesn't mean that it has good politics. I don't think it does.
Well, the politics are, well, some of them are explicit, but no worse than anything you'd get in any American movie.
No, exactly.
And the implicit ones are more troubling, but they're also very interesting.
It is, like just about any Vidor movie you're going to find, whatever his stance towards the economy or collectivism or anything else, it is a feminist film. I don't see how anyone could argue that it isn't.
Oh, that was one of the fascinating things as I was reading or glancing through the very long Wikipedia page, talking about his version of War and Peace and how he essentially thought the through line in War of Peace was Natasha's arc as a character.
It's a good movie.
And how he loved, like Wilder, he loved working with Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that one again. I mean, I've never disliked a King Vidor movie, but I've only seen War and Peace once, and it was quite a long time ago.
The obvious thing for him to make, but I guess he didn't have a chance to, would be Anna Karenina.
I guess it had been made too many times, and he didn't get the opportunity for whatever reason. You know.
But then I haven't read War and Peace, so maybe it is obvious and I just don't know it. But Audrey Hepburn is slowly becoming more interesting to me. She was very good in Love in the Afternoon.
I love that movie, yeah.
Yeah.
It might be my favorite Wilder after The Apartment.
Wow.
But back to this movie, I mean, Miriam Hopkins, this may be her greatest performance in a career studded with great performances, but really a unique turn she gives here.
Oh, and sorry, I should have added, I don't know at what point he became interested in Jungian philosophy, but he refers to Natasha as the anima of War and Peace. So he's fascinated by this idea of a feminine principle that he just embodies with multiple and very different actresses through the years.
How do you feel about Miriam Hopkins? Don't you feel like just a totally different Hopkins than you've ever seen before? I mean...
Sure. She was known, and in fact it says this on her Wikipedia page, for her versatility.
Well, yeah, she is. I mean, she can do a lot of different things. But...
We recently saw her play a bizarrely animated showgirl who's pretending to be a boy and gets really into it in a terrible Bing Crosby musical. We've seen her with Edward G. Robinson playing, what was this, a Gold Rush?
Barbary Coast, yeah.
Party girl of the Gold Rush.
Yeah.
And of course, I also know her from her Bette Davis rivalry movies and her
Trouble in Paradise
with Lubitsch. Yeah.
She's one of my favorite actresses.
That's a lot of versatility that we've just described, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah.
Mamoulian.
Her 30s films, if you stack them up all together against any other 30s actress, they compare quite favorably to most, I would say.
Yeah,
she's so relaxed in this movie.
I was going to say, she has a real warmth in this movie, and relaxation is not a quality you associate with Miriam Hopkins.
Exactly, she's a high-energy actress, and here, Vidor is like, let's just chill out for 90 minutes.
Notably, another connection to Ruby Gentry is that he likes having these female characters, and I guess this is true of Bette Davis in Beyond the Forest too, who are very, very, very sexual, but also androgynous. And he tries to put Miriam Hopkins in that riding outfit as often as he can in this movie.
And the kid likes her pants.
Yep, there's a comment.
Yeah, well, she looks good.
At the water pump.
In that outfit.
Another remarkable thing about this movie is that wife character.
Wonderful.
Another movie would play up her pathos more, but in this, the actress is given no special close-ups, no special attention, and she just reads her lines. But somehow the wife still emerges as a remarkable character.
And Vidor, this will be something that he kind of goes back to in a different way in The Wedding Night, because there's also a potential infidelity or actual infidelity situation going on with no fault all around, everyone definitely very sympathetic. H.M. Pullum Esquire as well, I would say, has So he does return to this situation quite often. Erotic attraction drawing people potentially outside of the bonds of marriage, and this not being something that should condemn people to hell forever.
Well, what has happened here is, which is spelled out for us, the wife, Lionel Barrymore says after their dinner, or no, I guess it's after the dancing night, that the wife has not gone off to college and the husband has. And
French atone.
They grew up in this rural area together, but now their interests have diverged, and we hear the wife, and again, it's interesting just how neutrally all of this is played. Her pathos isn't played up, but neither is her annoyingness. She just, delivers these lines, and that's all that she does, and you can take what you will from it. Because she spends all her time talking about baking and canning.
Yep.
Basically, and
she's one of the best at those things.
Yeah, but these are not subjects that interest her husband any longer. He's become an intellectual who wrote a highly praised thesis on agricultural techniques and who used to see a lot of theater.
Yeah, so he has a standing order to actually join the faculty at Cornell University.
But he swears he is a farmer.
Yeah, he wants to stay on the land and put his ideas into practice rather than teach others about agricultural theory.
But his marriage is not very enriching.
But it does seem to be happy in a low-key, not particularly intellectually satisfying way. Their kid seems really cool.
Yeah.
We don't spend that much time with Son, but he does make an impression as well.
Sure.
As an unusually perceptive and fun little companion.
And I don't think you should dismiss the idea that part of Ozu's love for this movie had to do with the food in it, because
I'm not dismissing that.
I really want to sit at that dinner table, and we'll talk about that scene, or the Thresher's table, and I want to eat those cookies and drink that lemonade.
Yeah, well, I agree.
And I guess that is part of the overall vibe that you're talking about with the comfort of this movie, right?
Everything you look at is made to seem like...
It's all really material...
Well, it's
material low-key luxury.
Thoreauvian detail or a fact blossoming into a truth. Right? Which is the whole idea behind transcendentalism, which is that you can pay attention to any part of the creation and it will reveal everything if you stare at it long enough.
Sure.
And I feel like that is what The Stranger's Return is all about, and the stranger returning to a place where she can get a vantage point that will help her to see that.
Absolutely, and yet it's interesting, a movie with this kind of theme now would do a lot more with there being nature scenes, and this is so housebound. You know, we get we get very little of the fields. We don't really see the estate. Yeah, the house and the comfort within the house, despite the tension in it, the conflict in it.
That house is part of Storehaven. It's part of the natural world. It is a fusion. So the transcendentalist vision of nature is not climbing Everest or something like that. It's Emerson walking on the common, right? Which is a landscaped part of a small town. So it's always a domesticated mingling of what we would think of as nature or vegetation and earth and human effort and thought. And that is all...
Well, that's very Zen. That's what the Zen garden is about, a blending of nature and man-made order.
Well, exactly. So that's why I think that, you know, interior or exterior, it's all nature.
It's also, I can't stress enough, the exact trope of Jane Austen's Mansfield Park, but translated into an American idiom, so that it's not the well-behaved woman or the traditional girl who becomes the inheritor of the estate and shows up all of the other candidates, you know, the people who are closer to the household. It's the inversion of that. Also, she gets her man, Fanny Price, although in a kind of dissatisfying way in terms of the plot. It's important to Vidor. It seems to be always important to Vidor that his heroines, or frequently he likes his heroines to end up in this state at the end of transcendental aloneness.
Right.
Solitude.
Yeah.
A full solitude. And people have always talked about what does the ending of his Stella Dallas mean, that final shot. And how does it mitigate this sort of tear-jerker plot where the woman has no life after motherhood? But I think the only answer to that lies in looking at King Vidor's oeuvre as a whole.
That she has a life, period, and she's going to continue living it.
Yeah, it's unambiguous if you look at his work as a whole.
No, she's not going to throw herself into a river.
No, but I mean, the question has been raised, what is the meaning of Stella's smile at the end there? It's like the opposite of the ending of Queen Christina. What is the meaning of the blank Garbo face, and what is the meaning of Stella Dallas's smile, you know? Well, we want to discuss the big dinner scene.
And the in-laws, we haven't really mentioned them except for Beulah Bondi.
Well, that's another inversion of Mansfield Park. In Mansfield Park, it is an outsider who comes into the household, as in this one. But this outsider is not, well, she is a relation, but she's a poor relation of the wife. And obviously the estate belongs to the husband, and their children are the ones who are not doing so well by the estate. And here it's in-laws, and a plot of blood will tell, blood will out. Yeah, right, he says she's the only store left.
The son that presumably would have inherited things if everything had gone according to plan was Miriam Hopkins' dad, and he's dead, and he was alienated from his father at the time of his death. So Lionel Barrymore is 85, we should mention. He's not 85 in real life, so he's playing much older than he is in this film. But I think he does a good job with the help of a prosthetic beard.
He's always grandpa.
Very often, yes.
Or in Devil Doll, grandma.
He was in the Civil War. This becomes a big plot point later on in the film. He is actually humming Union battle songs about marching into Georgia at the beginning of the film. So we're in the Midwest somewhere. They talk about Des Moines, so they may be in Iowa or near Iowa anyway. I guess it's the biggest town anywhere near them. This would have been where a lot of troops were recruited to take down the South in the 1860s, and this was still the high point of his life. It's the only time he's left the area, he says. He's wealthy. This is not like a huge concern where they are employing
I had the
tens
impression,
or hundreds of people.
Well, I was going to say I had the impression initially that this was more about only owning the land than about working the land, but then you get the whole threshing
Well, yeah, so
sequence.
Now, this is important, right? Because something that doesn't get discussed enough these days, but should be very much at the forefront of people's minds as a distressing fact of American history, and also Canadian history.
So this is a Days of Heaven situation.
Socialism, populism, the late 19th century, early 20th century was not really much of an urban phenomenon in North America. It was a Midwestern and Western agricultural and mining phenomenon more than anything.
Well, anyone who grew up in the Canadian prairies like me is aware of that.
Right.
There are still... We went to the Co-op when I was growing up. That was a rural, small-town grocery store and gas station that you go to. There are credit unions. I have an account with a credit union in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, and the most widely circulated socialist newspaper in the early 20th century was called the National Ripsaw. The association between agricultural work and banding together, populism, was very strong at that time, and you see it because you see that in the natural course of the work cycle, there are peak periods of time when everyone has to band together, whether they own the property or not. This is the threshing scene, right?
So it's not Days of Heaven where they're just hiring itinerant workers.
No, they describe what they do, right?
Yeah.
Everyone goes in together and buys one giant threshing machine that they all use, and they all help each other. One by one, they go to each person's property and do the threshing when it's time.
Just in order, to illustrate the importance of what Dave was talking about, though, this is how Canada got universal health care, because of the popularity of this kind of socialism in rural prairies provinces.
It's also a major subject of The Devil and Daniel Webster, right? Which is one of the key popular front films of the early 40s. It's about the Farmer's Grange, which was a kind of primitive socialist institution. The main character, who sells his soul to the devil, refuses to join the Grange. All of these states that were once the epicenters of socialist and populist sentiment are now red states, and that is because they have been riven.
Republicans got the bright idea at a certain point using racial rhetoric to divide the working class.
To the disgrace of all of these people, they have fallen for it. Everyone is paying the consequences of this. It's a sad story, a sad descent, and it starts in the 1890s. The first wave of populists already even in the South, there were people that were trying to work across the racial divides during the height of the Jim Crow and lynching period, right? And it just failed. They tried, and they could not make any headway against the ingrained racist attitudes of the people that they were trying to organize, the whites they were trying to organize. There's got to be a solution to this problem. It does not have to be this way, but nobody has found a way to do it yet.
We have to evolve out of the hating gene, defining identity in terms of in-group and out-group. So we're waiting for that.
We're waiting.
In the meantime,
in this film, we're still
there's definitely in-groups and out-groups in this film.
Yeah. But we don't get anything so grandiose as national politics in this film. We just get very microcosmic.
Anyway, this scene is extraordinary. This food scene, right? Where we hear the description of, as all the Threshers are banding together, all of the women, whose job it is, of course, to do the cooking and the cleaning, which we hear a lot about the cooking. We thankfully don't hear a lot about the cleaning.
Well, no, they do. They talk about how they've got Bela Bondi says, we've got an operation here, even if you were 3 guests instead of 1.
That's true.
Yeah, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they have work and they do it as well. So yes, the women compete with each other for who's going to give the men the best dinner after they've had a hard day of threshing. We see this opulent table piled up. Of course, it faintly reminded me of the scene in Woman Under the Influence.
Yeah, of course, it does.
Where the men come back from the pit and need some spaghetti.
If this movie were easier to find, I would have to think that it was an influence on Cassavetes, but nobody was able to see it in the 70s.
Obviously, there's some kind of consonance between Vidor's aesthetic and Cassavetes.
There is, definitely. Cassavetes, I lump in with the Hollywood transcendentalist.
And then what is interesting, considering, the feminism of Vidor and the independence of his women, is that Hopkins does not consider it... Well, she's tried her best this entire time without any resentment to fit in, because that's just the gracious thing to do. And so she knows that her job here is to serve these guys, so she's doing so, being competitive about it. She wants to help the other women in the house win. She wants the Store Haven household to win. Then the men catch on to this, and they decide to rib her.
Yes.
And so this is like a wonderful comedy sequence that happens in the middle of the movie.
Or she is taking 12 orders at once from different people, bringing things across to and fro.
She's being run off her feet.
Capper of all of this, of course, is everyone is clearly unable to eat another morsel. This one guy, at least, wants to keep the joke going and says that he could really use another slice of pie.
I think he's the guy who started it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With whipped cream. She says, we've got some, you better eat it, though.
Or she says, you're going to eat it if I have to stuff it in your face.
Yeah, she does. So she is serving them with a smile and with great alacrity, but also more sass than they're used to, and they love it.
Well, yeah, she ends up shoving it in his face, and this turns out to be exactly the thing to make the men love her.
Yeah, exactly.
She's now like in the ball of fire situation. She is Snow White with the 7, or considerably more than 7 dwarves.
Yeah, this part does have kind of a Hawksian aspect to it, but she's not Hawksian in any other way.
Meaning?
Meaning that I don't feel like it's even important to her to impress these guys. It's just situational.
It clearly is important to her. Like I said, she was doing all of this service.
But she's doing that to impress her grandfather, not really to impress them. And that's really to impress herself, that she can do it.
Well, the movie doesn't have a male perspective, so it's not about the woman...
Well, that's what I mean. That's why it's very different from a Hawks film.
Gaining entrance into the men's in-group.
Right, exactly.
She doesn't have to prove herself.
No, that's a very different emphasis.
It's just It's
a little challenge she sets for herself.
It's just a bonus that she turns out to be so fabulous at everything, basically.
Yeah.
She's more of a superhero, really.
A centerpiece scene, for sure. And it does, like everything else, it has to be seen to be properly appreciated for everything it can give you. It is a turning point, and it can linger in your mind as well, that that she will be able to
run the place. It is a test in that the grandfather is observing her this whole time and trying to determine if it makes sense for her to become his to inherit the estate.
Yeah. The worries are really brewing amongst the other relatives that this might be the drift of Grandpa's thought.
It also has a bit of I kept thinking about what is actually a really wonderful movie that I grew up with and love very much, even though it doesn't have the reputation of other Tennessee Williams plays, which is Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Although in that case, it's the daughter-in-law that turns out to be spiritual heir to the patriarch's sort of ethos.
And power.
Yes, I mean, on behalf of her husband.
Sure. Relationship between father figures and spirited daughters, it's something that Cavell talks about constantly in comedies.
Yeah, well, it plays out very differently in melodramas. Cavell is talking about specifically something he sees in common with some Hollywood romantic comedies and Shakespeare's comedies.
Yeah, exactly.
And Shakespeare
Prospero
does not have that in his tragedies.
No.
I mean, there is quite a relationship going on between Cordelia and Lear. You could project that they had such a relationship before the terrible time that the play begins at.
The relationship between Miriam Hopkins and Francho Tone, we should talk a bit more about it. They don't have a lot of scenes together, but they are really effective, I think.
Well, there's good car scene, just like the car scenes but not at all like the car scenes in Ruby Gentry.
No, not at all. But very intimate, yes. And again, the film just shows us this behavior in a way that doesn't seem odd now in a film, but in a 1933 film, this is really risky stuff.
I don't know if adultery tropes have changed that much. I think in a movie, adultery is always bad. So if you see any movie that's portraying it in a more chill way, that's still an unusual movie.
And this is really chill about it and not judgmental in any way. Francho Tone gets a notion that he must kiss her, and she was hoping that he would do it, but also distressed about what this will mean for his marriage, because she really likes Nettie.
Blows it off kind of lightly.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a really nice moment between them. They just sort of keep on with their drive.
They agree to forget it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a good idea, but nobody makes a big fuss about it. Nettie has her line toward the end of like when they think Grandpa has dementia, saying, if you just don't make a fuss, don't get too worried, don't make a fuss, things sort themselves out if you don't freak out, basically, and you know what she's referring to.
Absolutely. This is, again, the stoic, transcendental Zen approach to marital difficulties.
Yeah, I mean, it's blowing up into huge trope in Gone with the Wind with Melanie Wilkes.
Right. This is, the consequences here are going to be very different from something like Gone with the Wind.
The problem here is that, look, they could have an affair, but not if they're going to live together next door for the rest of their lives.
No.
There's nowhere you can go off and have your fling, right? So it would have to be a divorce, and then what are they going to do with Nettie and the kid? Like, none of it makes any sense. Like, they just can't do it.
No.
And so the real conflict and tension becomes about, since clearly she's going to get this property and she wants it, how is this all going to work out?
Are they just going to somehow find a way to be friends?
Well, that's not really an option.
No, they feel like it probably isn't going to work. The way the plot is resolved is, after a lot of things happen that we'll talk about, I'm sure, with Grandpa, he will leave and
we know he doesn't want to.
No, he doesn't. So yeah, he has to make a bigger sacrifice than she does in this case. Although he does have the consolation of
having
a great,
family,
but not inspiring family life.
And the wife seems like she is, like, despite her love of canning and cookie baking, that she is going to be very happy to live in a city.
Yeah, well, she may actually see some plays and then she'll get interested in talking about them with Francho Tone and their marriage will get better. It probably is for the best for them.
Yeah, I was trying to think how this would work out for him. Would he just end up having an affair with someone like Miriam Hopkins in the city? But
maybe not, because Nettie is clearly very smart. She just needs, more data input. And possibly she'll get it in a college town.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could...
Well, I mean, yeah, because the idea is not that he somehow gained intellect by going to university, but that he has become more sophisticated by being exposed to more things.
So yeah, this could redound to the benefit of all parties. Main thing that we still need to talk about is the extended period wherein Grandpa pretends to enter a fugue state.
And I have seen this movie with you before, but I'd forgotten the plot, and this all took me by complete surprise again. At one point, I do remember thinking, gee, this is unrealistic. Dementia does not come on violently all of a sudden with no warning.
It all was a ruse, so that works well. It kind of reminds me, I guess, understandable reasons, when Ben Horne starts doing his Civil
Of
War
course,
reenactment
Well,
stuff
maybe
in his office.
Maybe that's a tribute. But as you say, nobody got to see this movie other than Ozu, so
I don't know if David
no
Lynch...
other filmmakers got to see it. Just Ozu.
Scene where it's quite a curveball, right? They're talking about the past and the present as they're walking along on the grounds, and all of a sudden Grandpa, he must have been nursing this plan for a while, just like the gangster in Penthouse, and he just decides, on that moment, I'm gonna put it into action.
Well, I guess he's seen enough of her.
And it's also, the other thing that he's seen is that Beulah Bondi is going into overdrive with her campaign to get Miriam Hopkins out of town. She is spreading rumors, and the more this happens, the more likely Miriam Hopkins is to just beg off and return to New York City.
Well, right, this is a scenario where she's able to win over the men, but not the women. In Ruby Gentry, she can't win over anybody.
Right.
Different milieu. Well, there's also a class element, so that makes the difference.
All of a sudden, he thinks he sees Rebs in the forests, and he starts making plans to defend the estate from, this invasion. Obviously, Lionel Barrymore is having a lot of fun with this role at
Right,
this
and
point.
he keeps acting like he's drawing Wizard of Oz style parallels between his fantasy and reality, and pointing to
Traitors
in his household. Treason is happening all the time. But then it turns out he's just having fun with that, too.
Yep. Beulah Bondi will be court-martialed or just told to leave with $1,000 and find her own way somewhere else. Things get a little more up-tempo here and melodramatic. Miriam Hopkins is very distraught by this. She goes to get Franchot Tone, hoping that maybe because of his special relationship with Grandpa, he can break through this fog and bring him back to 1933, but he says he can't. And she's actually a little upset with him because he treats it more cavalierly than...
Well, it turns out that he's in on it.
Well, exactly. But yeah, we don't know any of this while it's happening. He is the only one that gets the update that Grandpa is just pulling a fake so that he can draw his family offside and make them reveal themselves to be the scoundrels that they are.
Did you think that handyman or constantly employed worker,
Stu Irwin, yeah.
do you think he might be an illegitimate son?
Well, that would be the plot line in a different movie, right? Like Home from the Hill or something. He feels like the George Peppard character in Home from the Hill, doesn't he?
It's never mentioned if this is the case, but it wouldn't be surprising.
You never know, yeah.
You think he'd be even more resentful, though. He's pretty happy with his lot.
No, he's really not resentful. I mean, unless...
I mean, he has his moments, but
he's drunk
he
all
wants
the
to
time.
drink even
so
more than he...
There's something
Eating at
affecting
him.
his soul,
Yeah.
for sure. But he doesn't seem to...
And he randomly threatens to choke his dates like Gian Gameshi, so
Yeah.
there's something eating at him there,
Yes.
but it's never revealed.
No, never. He is an enigmatic figure.
He's a bit of a Caliban, including the way he's treated by Prospero Grandpa at the end, that he's not set free. He's one of the people that need to be spanked and taken care of.
And I like Stu Irwin. He's an interesting actor. He's more known...
My creature, I think that's what Prospero calls him at the end.
Good parallel. He's best known for his comedy roles. And, this is sort of a comedy role, but it has a harder
Dark side.
edge than
a dark
he normally
Caliban
has.
side. Caliban, I think, nearly rapes somebody at some point. Okay, well, I'll take that out because I don't remember. But I'm
think
pretty
he
sure
might.
that happens.
I mean, that scene, it's a bravura scene when the three doctors arrive, the insane board, as they're called.
Well, this is the second even more extended comedy sequence.
Grandpa drops the mask at a certain point and says, I brought you all here so that you could witness the complete changeover of my will to get rid of these hangers-on and bring Miriam Hopkins into the fold.
And Ozu is just pissing himself at this point.
And Grant Mitchell, the son-in-law, is forced to draw up the will that disinherits himself and his wife and Beulah Bondi. It's quite something.
Draw it up very carefully. But of course we want all of this to... Even though what he's doing is sort of cruel, we want... Well, not sort of. This to all unfold as it has done, because, again, Miriam Hopkins has just been presented to us as this superhero.
And it's not as cruel as you think.
Who deserves everything.
He's actually giving them more than enough money to continue their lives. They just don't get his farm, that's all.
Well, husband and wife, they get a
house.
A house, so that's fine. I don't know how far $1,000 is going to carry
a long way.
Old Beulah Bondi.
No, that's pretty good. $1,000 in 1933 can take you a long way.
But I guess he's like practically a millionaire, and that's what they were after. Because they're not going to live in this house. They're going to sell it, clearly.
Pretty gentle, even though he really crushes all of their hopes.
He's really enjoying himself.
Yeah. And he tells Grant Mitchell that he's not sure whether he likes effectual evil or complete buffoonery like Grant Mitchell's...
Well, that's what I'm talking about, the cruelty. More than what he doles out to them is he's just turning the screws, showing how much he hates them and actually has contempt for them.
But then he does relent, right? And the movie also lets us see that at least the married couple, not Beulah Bondi, she's evil, but the other two...
This is what brings about his speech that I've now... or line that I've now talked about several times, about spanking the little people and feeding them.
They're spiritually little, right? I mean, Grant Mitchell is a lawyer. He's a professional man. He is not hired hand or anything. He's not even someone that has trouble earning money.
It's true, but it has come on the heels of this will situation.
Yeah.
So literal money has been discussed, and homes.
Yes, definitely.
Problem I'm having is that the movie makes an equation, a metaphor, that could or could not translate into real-life politics, about spiritual littleness also being economic littleness, or at least spiritual bigness being economic bigness.
There's always that danger with transcendentalist modes of thought, definitely.
And not just transcendentalist, because like I say, this inheritance of the estate theme predates Emerson.
Oh yeah, of course it does, for sure.
The French Revolution, right after that is when Jane Austen was writing.
But I mean, I'm talking about this concept of people as big people, little people.
Well, in Austen, it's kind of even becomes more abstract than that, in that the idea of the estate stands for something that isn't embodied in any of the actual people who own it, except the spiritual heir.
Yes.
But in this case, the owners are the spiritual heirs as well. So that's the American part of it, I think.
Yeah, the yeoman republic aspect of it.
Yeah.
So, great movie.
Yeah, I was a little bit philosophically troubled by it, but I did enjoy it a lot. The more of the work I see, I'm getting more and more impressed by the 30s movies of these melodrama directors and auteurs like Vidor and Borzage and Stahl. It's a more interesting body of work that I'm used to. I guess I used to think of the 30s as mainly about screwball comedy, and yet and von Sternberg films, and yet there's so much more.
So much more. I think it is still my favorite decade, although...
Oh, that's really hard to say, though.
Yeah, of course it is. And it's stupid for me to even try to make comments about decades like that, but I did.
I often feel like 30s, 40s, or 50s are my favorite decade. I kind of go back and forth there.
Yeah. Getting back to MGM, we can close with that.
Oh yeah, because I was saying, this movie feels like a Vidor movie. It feels like it has nothing to do with MGM.
That's right, and he is out after this movie. He's no longer at MGM after this point. And he was always kind of an exception at MGM, right? And a lot of that was premised
Was he not an exception everywhere?
Yeah.
He did a bunch of stuff with Goldwyn.
Yeah, right after this.
Yeah, including Stella Dallas. This came about because I was reading his Wikipedia entry. You know how we're doing the 2 imitations of life, the Stahl and the Cirque, and reading the book? I want to do
the first Stella Dallas?
The 2 Goldwyn Stella Dallases, and read the book, and I got the book on ebook.
Cool. Yeah, it's Ronald Colman in the original, right? And who is the actress? Who is Stella?
Well, what got me thinking about it was the fact that it says...
Isn't it Henry King?
Yes, it is Henry King, our friend from Jennifer Jones, is from the Jennifer Jones series. The Wikipedia entry was talking about how Stanwyck selectively or judiciously modeled her performance on the silent Goldwyn actress's performance. So I would be very interested in comparing them, and yes, Henry King seems like a good man for the material. The actress is Belle Bennett. I don't know who she is, but this was apparently a famous performance.
Right. Yeah, so Vidor had that huge hit with The Big Parade, and Thalberg made exceptions for him ever after, right? So he let him make The Crowd, even though they knew it wouldn't make money. They made Hallelujah, which was a really risky project in a different way. Then he would do crowd pleasers that brought in big bucks like The Champ and Oscar noms and that kind of thing. But then he does this, right? I mean, this is a very small scale film that could not possibly have enriched MGM's coffers.
Let alone Our Daily Bread. That was
Vidor financed that himself.
Oh, that was his own thing. Okay.
Yeah, and after that, yeah, he's doing things like The Wedding Night is Goldwyn, Stella Dallas is Goldwyn. He will wind up working at MGM a couple more times later, Comrade X and H.M. Pullum Esquire, but that initial contract that was launched by The Big Parade, that's over as of right now. And this film does not feel integral to the identity of the MGM studio in the 30s. The way Penthouse really does feel like something that is an indicator of what's to come from this studio. So that's MGM in 1933, a little maverick action and a little setting things up for a big run with Myrna Loy.
A couple of other things. We had a little exchange on Twitter that was interesting, and we watched another couple of Wilders. Well, you watched another couple of Wilders. I was going to rewatch Hold Back the Dawn, but I couldn't hold back my sleep. No fault of the movie. It's just, when I'm tired, and the lights are low for the films, and off I go into snooze land at the end of a workday. But we did watch, I had never seen Arise My Love before, another Mitchell Eisen with a Wilder and Brackett script that was excellent. Similar to Foreign Affair, which Wilder directed, in that it mixed romantic comedy tropes with World War II time politics. It did it in a way that, this being a Mitchell Eisen movie, was a lot more tonally smooth than Wilder, but I'm not sure if that's actually a superiority or just a difference. I think it's more just a difference. They're both very interesting movies. This one, like I said, went down easier and felt like more of a whole and was more of a satisfying viewing experience, but I'm not sure that really makes it a better movie. But anyway, I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, Arise My Love.
And I did cry during that. Who is that actress who gives that speech as the sort of hostess of the hotel where they stay?
I don't know.
That little political speech, and I just started crying. She was so good. I'm going to look that up while you talk about the movie.
This was a natural double feature, Arise My Love and Hold Back the Dawn, two Wilder and Eisen collaborations that were released kind of back to back by Paramount. They both have Walter Abel in really important roles as well.
So according to this very brief Wikipedia entry, she was an American vaudeville star in the 1910s and 20s, and she must have just been somebody that everybody knew, because she's in tons of movies, but uncredited in what appears to be bit parts, to say the least, like Madame Poulard in Jezebel.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, she has a really crucial scene in this one.
And it's extraordinary. It's just extraordinary what Eisen gets her to do with that speech. It's just like the linchpin of the whole movie.
It is. Northern France, southern Belgium being steamrolled, and all the death that has occurred there once before and is going to happen again as this movie is revving up. It's 1940 and France is getting crushed by the Nazis.
And she actually convinces Claudette Colbert, for the moment, that all of her American ambitions, queer woman ambitions, are worth giving up for American comfort and safety.
Yeah.
But then she becomes unconvinced. The movie's just all over the place, fascinatingly all over the place, it's very philosophical, like A Foreign Affair.
An accurate record, I think, of the state of mind of anyone who is contemplating political action that requires violence or subjecting yourself to the possibility of being killed anyway. And Claudette Colbert is not planning to take up arms herself, but she is putting herself in harm's way.
And that sounds really obvious. My goodness, if you're going to put yourself at risk, it's going to be hard and you have to think about it and you're going to vacillate. But the movie is just so thoughtful about it.
This is the kind of movie that gets people blacklisted later, right? 1940, America is not anywhere near being in this war.
And Wilder, kind of like in his own way, Borzage earlier. Yeah, they're doing things here that no one else was doing. They are the only people thinking about it and willing to speak about what's happening.
Well, not the only people, but it's still fairly rare. There is Confessions of a Nazi Spy from 1938 by Warner Brothers. There are a few, and there's William Dieterle's Spanish Civil War movie Blockade in 1938 as well.
True, it's not the norm, though. You had to go out of your way.
Oh yeah, no, this is...
And I guess he was able to get away with it because he and Brackett were such a hot writing team.
Yeah, they had just done Ninotchka, which was all about commies converting to the capitalist way of life when they see how nice the hats are and how nice Melvin Douglas is.
While I was doing all the reading on Wilder, I didn't rewatch Ninotchka, a movie I've seen many times, but I did re-encounter Greta Garbo's line about the, Stalinist purges.
Fewer but better Russians.
Fewer but better Russians. And that just, what an incredible... Nobody could write a political comedy line like that. That's just Billy Wilder.
It is a great movie, Ninotchka.
Nobody could make movies like this one. Political comedies like he does.
As much as I like Rise My Love, I think it's a great movie. I think Hold Back the Dawn is even greater. It's one of my very favorite.
It's a sort of political comedy, too.
Very much is.
Comedy, more of a melodrama, but political melodrama, romantic melodrama. And it was based on real experiences that Wilder had. Well, not too closely, but he also had to get into America through the, I guess, Mexican border.
Yeah.
It is Mexico that they're in.
It's definitely Mexico.
And he was basically at the mercy of the humanity of the border officer, whatever you call them.
Yeah, the whim, right? Because that's what it winds up being, ultimately.
Even though he had a family member, I think a brother, and a job in Hollywood, it still... If you didn't have all your papers right there and you couldn't get them, you were at the whim of the officer.
Yeah, and at the whim of the quota law, which doesn't get referenced that often, but a major
Well, I'm sure the quota
landmark
from Germany was bigger than... where does he say he's
Romania.
from? Romania. Yeah.
So it's a landmark in racism, right? That's 1924. American government decides to stem the tide of immigration from places it deems undesirable. All those Eastern Europeans and Italians coming in the late 1890s and early 1900s.
Oh, I guess, Wilder was not German. He's from Vienna. Yeah.
So there was an Austrian quota as well, I'm sure, because they just set it up. It's a certain percentage of whatever the immigration number was in the year right before a lot of Catholics started coming and non-WASPs in general. So they set it arbitrarily at a date.
And so there's a little bit of a structure that's like, well, this is very much another one of Wilder's films, like A Foreign Affair, that strongly, strongly resembles Henry James plotting. There's also foreshadowing of the structure of Double Indemnity in that this officer, I wish I just knew, what do you call him?
Immigration officer.
Walter
Abel.
It's not customs, it's not border. So this immigration officer is like snooping around and checking on people all of the time and ends up, being, again, the one who decides Charles Boyer's fate once he discovers what he's been up to.
Yeah.
And we see the power that he wields over all of these hopeful immigrants.
Yeah, it's totally arbitrary. He's a weird character, right? Because he's treating it...
I'm thinking of the Edward G. Robinson character in Double Indemnity.
The little man, yeah.
Yeah.
In this one, Walter Abel makes several decisions that... But again, it's just because he decides to be beneficent, right? He allows Rosemary DeCamp's character to sneak into American territory and give birth to her baby so that the baby will be an American citizen. Right. He also decides that he's not going to report Charles Boyer's activities because he becomes convinced of the purity of his love for Olivia de Havilland, which isn't a bit hard.
But there's a guy who said at the beginning who says that he's keeping him on that side of the border just to get haircuts, and you think he might be correct.
That's the joke, but he's also happy. That guy, Kurt Bois, he turns out to be a descendant of the Marquis de Lafayette, and there's a parade in his honor at the end of this movie as he is welcomed with fanfare to America.
Yeah, I guess originally, the officer turns out to be a good guy, but amount of power that he wields is what is emphasized at the beginning.
Exactly. And that is a problem.
Film.
Whether he's nice or not. One person shouldn't have this discretion over people's lives.
Yeah, and I think Wilder took that away from his experience, despite the fact that he was eternally, grovelingly grateful to this particular officer that allowed him to get across.
The movie also has Wilder's trademark sophistication in general about everything, right? Like, Paulette Goddard's character is... in any other movie would be completely thrown under the bus. And in this one, she loses Charles Boyer because they're not really in love anyway, so it makes sense. But she is an American citizen. Nothing takes that away from her. And she's got a millionaire to tour around America with at the end. And Walter Abel's like, good luck, sucker, he tells the guy, because the guy can't speak English.
People have called this Wilder's sophistication, Wilder's cynicism, and I've just, after watching all of these Wilder films and really thinking about them, I just want to call it, for me, it just says Wilder's radical humanism, again.
Well, you could take any of those
because how can you call it cynicism? He is generous towards everyone.
Yeah.
He's without illusions, and yet extends generosity towards these characters that he has no illusions towards. So to me, that is humanism.
I agree.
It is not cynicism at all.
Well, there's certainly nothing cynical about what happens to Charles
Well, of
Boyer
course,
in
none of
this
that
movie.
applies to Barbara Stanwyck and Double Indemnity. Everyone refers to that as some kind of key Wilder movie, and the more I see of Wilder, the more it seems like a complete anomaly. I mean, there is sympathy extended towards Fred McMurray's character.
Well, the thing about Double Indemnity is that it is a pretty poignant love story, but it's between Fred McMurray and Edward G. Robinson.
Right.
There's nothing cynical about their relationship. It is a really deep bond that they have that is ruptured.
I mean, I guess you could say that Wilder took some pretty nasty, cynical material and actually found a way to put a human relationship into it. He just couldn't possibly do it between the two heterosexual characters.
Not in that context,
Or
no.
within the characters within the heterosexual romance.
That is what is great about Double Indemnity, their relationship. And Stanwyck having fun with her character, but she's not a character that makes a whole lot of sense as a human being. And I don't think she's meant to.
No.
But yeah, this movie, I love Olivia de Havilland in it. She gives one of her great comedic performances that blends into quite seamlessly into a quite affecting emotional performance as things get deeper. And her scene near the end where she knows everything and doesn't give him away to the immigration officials is incredible. And her distraught drive back to Azusa after going through this terrible ordeal. Everyone brings their A game. And Paulette Goddard is essential to the triangle as well, because she makes you really some way to care about this character, even though she's doing some pretty nasty things. You know, until Charles Boyer gets religion, the Olivia de Havilland religion, he is a much less sympathetic character than Paulette Goddard is. Like,
well,
at least she has feelings for him.
It's the plot from Wings of the Dove.
It is.
Except that Densher is in love with Kate Croy, so he actually transfers his affections. And in this case, Boyer is in love with nobody until he falls in love with Olivia de Havilland.
And there's a great, which apparently is all just the product of circumstance, but I love it. The fact that they've got this metatextual element with Mitchell Lyson himself in the movie listening to the story as a pitch from Charles Boyer, who's on the run from the immigration officials. And you say that this all came about because...
No, I was just guessing at that. There is a story that is told that, you know, there's all this legendary fighting between Lyson and Wilder. They didn't get along because Lyson wanted writers to go away and shut up after he started filming, which is reasonable, I think.
Yeah.
But not all directors work that way. Anyhow, a story that there was Charles Boyer had to deliver a monologue about his situation to a bug crawling up his wall, which sounds awesome and very much anticipates the creativity of the voiceover narration in Sunset Boulevard. But Boyer thought this was stupid, which is also reasonable. And Lyson was like, because Lyson was always looking for ways to cut Wilder and Brackett's wordy scripts. He was like, okay, fine, we'll cut it out. He wanted to please the star. Wilder became apoplectic. But anyway, I'm wondering, I just fantasized that maybe this framing device was a substitute for what was going to be a monologue with flashbacks to a bug crawling up his wall.
Yeah, very possibly, right? And it makes its kind of poetic justice that Mitchell Lyson wrote himself into the film.
Had to be in there. Or maybe Wilder did that for laughs, or who knows.
This was a bug, Mitchell.
Exactly! You are the bug that he's monologuing to. See, now
you insect.
That's our fan fiction.
And Charles Boyer, one of the great actors of the classical era, really, no one could have done a better job with this character than he does. It's really hard to play this kind of a heel so lovably.
He could play a purely evil heel,
Sturgis
too.
Bauer.
As in Gaslight.
Yeah, Sturgis Bauer. I
Yeah.
never forget that character's name because he's so evil.
And then he could also not. What about our Twitter interaction? You told me someone followed our Twitter podcast feed.
Yes, Christina Lane, author of a book that came out very recently on Joan Harrison, one of the great producers of the 40s.
We don't know if somehow she was searching for Joan Harrison's name and it came up that a couple of years from now in our neurotically forward planned scheduling, we have a Joan Harrison episode, or if it's pure coincidence, but either way.
Either way, I contacted her and she said she's ready to answer any of our Joan Harrison questions, so we'll definitely read the book. And we have our episode scheduled for April 2021. So that's not that long from now. It's less than a year from now.
Not in terms of our scheduling.
And we will be much more informed than we would have been if we hadn't gotten word of this book.
Yeah, it'll be so exciting to read a book on Joan Harrison, so I'm glad we found out about this.
Yeah, so we're planning to talk about 4 movies at that point, and probably after that we'll do the rest of the movies she produced in a second effort in 2022.
She just seems to have, quite aside from the fact that she was a rare woman producer working in classical Hollywood cinema, her filmography is just really fascinating.
No, they're almost all great movies.
Yeah, and
maybe
really
all
weird movies too.
I guess that's it. Next week,
that's it.
It's the Actourist Oeuvre Review once again. We're back with Setsuko Hara, and we're going to be talking about Kurosawa's The Idiot, so an adaptation of Dostoevsky, and Early Summer by Ozu.
Should be an interesting pairing.
So it's the second of the Noriko trilogy, so a revered film. I've never seen The Idiot, so I'm looking forward to that, and anytime I can see Ozu, I am elated, so...
Absolutely.
We'll see you then.